While the president was overseas, work continued on a $1 trillion infrastructure compromise bill of some sort, which is now at the top of Biden's list. The group is now made up of 21 senators out of 110 Democrats. Now 11 Republicans have backed the compromise bill. But even as that effort is underway, Senate Democrats are also talking amongst themselves about a $6 trillion budget package that would include Biden's proposals and could pass without Republican support. Meanwhile, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, West Virginia, his proposals for voting rights legislation are getting support from voting rights advocate Stacey Abrams, and they have been welcomed by several other Democrats. Manchin's proposals include making Election Day a public holiday, mandate at least 15 consecutive days of early voting for federal elections, ban partisan gerrymandering, and require voter ID with allowable alternatives to prove identity. Democrats have been firmly against requiring voter identification of any kind before, but even that part of Manchin's compromise got Stacey Abrams' endorsement. That was of note. Here is, in fact, what Abrams had to say about Manchin's proposal today.
I am endorsing the fact that we now have a list of priorities and that Joe Manchin is at the table and he's part of the conversation. I think that he makes common sense opportunities available for compromise. It is only going to be through federal legislation that we can negate or mitigate the harms being created at the state level.
And remember, here are the stakes. Nearly 400 bills that would make it harder for Americans to vote have been proposed in 48 of our 50 states. Manchin's proposal still needs support from 10 Senate Republicans to pass. It comes as The Hill and other media outlets report Majority Leader Chuck Schumer plans to move ahead with a floor vote Tuesday on the For the People Act. Also tonight, there are new developments in the investigation into the 1-6 riot, insurrection, and desecration of our capital. Today, the Department of Justice released new police body camera footage from that January 6th assault. It was used in the case against a former Marine and retired New York City police officer accused of participating in the attack. Fair warning here, just like what we saw on that day, these images are disturbing. As we mentioned, this was also a landmark day. We saw the president sign into law a new federal holiday to commemorate Juneteenth, or June 19th of 1865, the day enslaved African Americans were emancipated in Texas. This year, Juneteenth falls on Saturday. The new holiday will be observed tomorrow, and federal workers, as a result, will have the day off. And Phil, I'd like to start with you and your beat. Is it us watching from afar up and down the Eastern Corridor, or are there signs of movement, be it ever so humble, in the president's domestic agenda?
You know, Brian, there certainly are signs of movement here in Washington for President Biden, who, remember, just returned to the United States after a lengthy and eventful foreign trip that concluded with that meeting with President Putin. He got here and suddenly there were signs of hope. There's the Supreme Court ruling on Obamacare, of course, which is a really significant development for this White House and for the Democratic Party as a whole, preserving that health care program. But the bipartisan movement over on Capitol Hill in terms of the infrastructure plan is a very welcome sign by this White House, which has patiently been working for months now through the spring to try to bring Republicans together with Democrats to work out some sort of a deal. It's not done yet, of course, and it does not include some of the climate change and other initiatives that are so important to the progressive base of the Democratic Party, but it is progress towards bipartisanship nevertheless. And then Joe Manchin, the West Virginia senator, becoming effectively that 50th vote for the Voting Rights Act or voting rights legislation, rather, is significant. It means that Democrats, when they bring this to the floor in the Senate next week to begin debate, should have unified support within their caucus, which is a political win for the White House, even if it doesn't necessarily yet mean that bill is going to be passing the Senate, because, of course, it's going to need those 10 Republican votes as well.
And Lisa, let's talk about that very dynamic that Phil raises. Biden has to hold the Democrats, and oh, by the way, in his spare time, good luck finding 10 Republicans to pull across.
That's exactly right. Finding 10 Republicans in this sort of polarized political environment is a really heavy lift. And that's why you see Democrats pursuing this dual track approach to the infrastructure legislation, where on the one hand, there's a group that's negotiating this bipartisan infrastructure bill that comes in at about $1.2 trillion. And then Democrats are also working on a $6 trillion infrastructure package that, should that bipartisan bill fall apart, they could try to push through using reconciliation, which means they'd only have to, clear a 50-vote hurdle. There's political pros and cons to both approaches. Biden certainly wants, as Phil said, this bipartisan achievement. He ran as this bipartisan legislator, this longtime line of the Senate and vice president, experienced Washington hand who could cut across these polarized divisions and get things done. But he also made some pretty big promises to the Democratic base, which won't be fulfilled in that bipartisan package. On the flip side, there's the question about the bigger bill, whether moderates would Democratic moderates like Joe Manchin and others in the Senate would get behind such a big proposal and get them to that 50 number. So this still remains a pretty precarious negotiation for both of these potential paths.